Margaret Maggie Chen had lived through 93 winters in the Montana wilderness, and she thought she'd seen everything nature could throw at her. The retired NASA engineer had chosen this remote cabin after her husband died, seeking peace among the snow-covered pines. But, on this bitter February morning, as she trudged through knee-deep snow to check her rabbit traps, she discovered something that would change not just her life, but the fate of two civilizations. The creature lay half-buried in a drift beside the frozen creek, its massive form creating an unnatural depression in the snow. At first glance, Maggie thought it was a fallen tree, blackened by lightning. But, as she approached, her engineering mind began cataloging details that didn't fit. The surface wasn't bark, it was scaled, each plate the size of her palm, shimmering with an iridescent blue-black that reminded her of oil on water. What she had mistaken for branches were actually limbs, powerful and angular, ending in claws that could have belonged to no earthly predator. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, she whispered, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The thing was easily 30 feet long from snout to tail, with wings folded against its body like collapsed sails. Its head was elongated and noble, despite being covered in frost, with closed eyes the size of dinner plates. Most people would have run. Most people would have called the authorities, or at least grabbed a camera. But Maggie had spent 40 years solving impossible problems for NASA, and her first instinct wasn't fear, it was curiosity. She circled the creature carefully, noting the way its chest rose and fell in barely perceptible movements. It was alive, but just barely. The scales along its neck showed signs of severe damage. What looked like burn marks scorched across its hide, and a thick, crystalline substance had formed around several wounds, not ice, but something that glowed faintly even in the gray morning light. Maggie had seen similar formations in her work with experimental propulsion systems. This wasn't natural trauma. This was damage from technology far beyond anything humans possessed. She knelt beside the creature's massive head, pulling off her wool mitten to check for signs of life. The moment her bare skin touched the scales, warmth flooded through her, not physical heat, but something deeper. Images flashed through her mind, vast ships moving between stars, worlds of crystal and light, a desperate battle against something dark and hungry. And, underneath it all, a voice that spoke without words, weak but unmistakably intelligent. "Help me!" Maggie jerked her hand back, heart pounding. In her decades of space research, she'd always wondered if humanity was alone. Now she had her answer, and it was dying in her backyard. The practical part of her mind kicked in. Whatever this creature was, it needed immediate medical attention. The nearest hospital was 40 miles away through treacherous mountain roads, and she seriously doubted they'd know how to treat an alien dragon. More importantly, if word got out about this discovery, her peaceful clearing would be swarming with government agents within hours. She'd seen how bureaucracy could destroy scientific progress, and she suspected this being needed protection more than publicity. Her cabin had been modified over the years to accommodate her various projects. The barn she'd converted into a workshop was large enough, and it had heating. More importantly, it had the medical equipment she'd installed after her husband's heart attack. Basic life support, diagnostic tools, even a small surgical suite she'd never had the heart to dismantle. "All right, gorgeous," she said to the unconscious creature. "Let's get you somewhere warm." Moving 30 feet of alien dragon turned out to be the engineering challenge of her retirement. Maggie spent the next hour rigging a pulley system using her tractor, several cargo straps, and a makeshift sled constructed from her emergency lumber supply. The creature was surprisingly light for its size, its bones seemed hollow, built for flight rather than ground-based locomotion. As she worked, more images flickered through her mind whenever she touched the being. She saw its name Vaelther, which meant starwing in a language older than human civilization. She saw glimpses of its life, soaring through nebulae, hunting among asteroid fields, protecting something precious from an implacable enemy. And she saw the battle that had brought it here, damaged and desperate, using the last of its strength to reach what its long-range sensors had identified as a safe world. Safe. The irony wasn't lost on her. Earth, with its wars and pollution and generally hostile approach to the unknown, was this magnificent being's idea of sanctuary. By noon, Maggie had Vaelther secured in her workshop, positioned on a bed of heated blankets and foam padding. The creature's breathing had stabilized somewhat, but the crystalline growths around its wounds worried her. Under better lighting, she could see they were spreading, creeping across healthy scales like some kind of infection. She set up her medical monitors, adapting the sensors to work with the alien physiology. Valther's heart, or hearts, the readings suggested multiple cardiovascular organs beat in a rhythm unlike anything in Earth's ecosystem. The creature's body temperature was higher than a human's, but not by much. Most intriguingly, its brain activity showed patterns that reminded her of REM sleep, but far more complex. As evening fell, Maggie found herself talking to her patient while she worked. "You know, I always wondered what I'd do if I met someone from the stars. When I was young, I figured I'd ask about faster-than-light travel, or anti-gravity, or how to solve world hunger. Turns out, the first thing I want to know is whether you're going to be okay." She had rigged in 4-drip with a glucose solution, though she had no idea if the creature could process human-compatible nutrients. The important thing was maintaining hydration and electrolyte balance while she figured out how to treat the spreading crystal infection. Her research into the crystalline growths revealed something troubling. The substance was clearly artificial, but it was interfacing with Valther's nervous system. Every few hours, the crystals would pulse with that same faint light, and the creature would stir, muscles twitching as if fighting invisible enemies. It was some kind of weapon, Maggie realized, not designed to kill quickly, but to cause prolonged suffering. "Who would do this to you?" she whispered, gently cleaning around one of the smaller growths. The crystal was warm to the touch and seemed to respond to pressure by growing slightly brighter. "And why did they want you to suffer?" As if in response to her question, Valther's eyes opened. They were vast and deep, like looking into the heart of a star. Intelligence burned there, ancient and profound, but also pain and something that might have been hope. The great head lifted slightly, and those impossible eyes focused on Maggie with an intensity that should have been terrifying. Instead, she felt a profound sense of recognition, as if she were meeting an old friend after a long absence. "You saved me," the voice in her mind said, clearer now. "I felt your kindness even in the darkness. You are not what my people expected of this world, your people?" Maggie asked aloud, settling into a chair beside the makeshift bed. "Are there others like you?" "Few remain. My kind, the Drachneth, have fought the Devourers for 1,000 of your years. We thought we were winning, until they found a new weapon. A poison that turns our own bodies against us." Valther's gaze moved to the crystal growths, and Maggie felt a wave of bitter emotion. It spread slowly, keeping us alive to serve as beacons for their hunting fleets. Every infected dragon becomes a tracking device, leading them to new worlds to consume. The implications hit Maggie like a physical blow. "You mean, by coming here, I have doomed your world?" "Yes. Unless the poison can be stopped." There was resignation in the mental voice, but also determination. My ship's computer contained data on human medical capabilities. Primitive by our standards, but your species has something we lost long ago, the ability to adapt, to find solutions in chaos. If anyone can cure what our greatest healers could not, it would be a human. Maggie laughed, surprising herself. "You want a 93-year-old retired engineer to cure an alien bioweapon?" "Honey, I haven't practiced medicine in 50 years, and even then, I was just a medic." "You misunderstand. The poison is not biological, it is technological. Nanoscale machines that mimic living cells while rewriting neural pathways." Images flooded her mind, microscopic views of the crystals, showing them to be incredibly complex mechanical structures. "Your people have developed techniques for working at the molecular level. Your nanotechnology research, though crude, follows principles we abandoned millennia ago." "Because it didn't work?" "Because we became too sophisticated to remember that simple solutions are often the most effective." Maggie stared at the spreading crystals with new understanding. "You're not asking me to cure you. You're asking me to break you. The poison's weakness is also its strength. It must maintain constant communication with the Devourer fleet to update their location data. Disrupt that communication, and the nanomachines will attempt to repair themselves using surrounding materials, turning them into something harmless." Maggie's mind was already racing through possibilities. "But, if I'm wrong, if I damage them incorrectly? Then, I die, and your world has perhaps days before the fleet arrives." If you succeed, we gain time and, possibly an ally who knows their weaknesses, *. The weight of the decision settled on her shoulders. She thought of her quiet retirement, of the peaceful years she'd planned to spend reading and gardening. Then, she thought of the images Valthor had shared, worlds stripped bare by the Devourers, entire civilizations reduced to ash and empty space. Well, she said, reaching for her laptop. I guess I'd better dust off my materials science textbooks. But, first, you need to tell me everything about these Devourers. If I'm going to save your life and, possibly my world, I want to know exactly what we're up against. As Valthor began to share the history of the war among the stars, Maggie Chen prepared to undertake the most important project of her life. Outside, snow continued to fall on the Montana wilderness, peaceful and quiet. But that peace was about to end, and everything would depend on whether a retired engineer and a wounded dragon could find a way to turn humanity's greatest weakness, its primitive technology, into its greatest strength. The battle for Earth was about to begin, and it would start in a converted barn with a 93-year-old woman who would never back down from an impossible challenge. The next 72 hours transformed Maggie's workshop into something resembling a mad scientist's laboratory crossed with an alien medical bay. While Valthor rested, gathering strength and sharing crucial intelligence about Devourer technology, Maggie worked with a focused intensity she hadn't felt since her NASA days. The crystalline poison was indeed a masterpiece of nanotechnology, far beyond anything humans had achieved. Under her electron microscope, the structures revealed themselves to be self-assembling networks of artificial neurons, designed to hijack the victim's nervous system while simultaneously broadcasting their location across interstellar distances. The elegance was terrifying and familiar. These signal patterns, Maggie muttered, comparing her readings to archived data from her old projects. Valthor, look at this frequency modulation. It's almost identical to the communication protocols we developed for the Deep Space Network. The dragon's mental voice carried surprise. Your species has encountered this technology before, not exactly. But, we've been working on quantum entanglement communication for decades. The math is the same, they're using paired particles to send instantaneous signals across space. Maggie pulled up decades-old research files, her fingers flying across the keyboard with renewed purpose. The difference is scale. They're doing at the molecular level what we can barely manage with room-sized equipment. Then, you understand the weapon's weakness, *. I'm beginning to. Maggie studied the data streams flowing from her improvised sensors. Quantum entanglement only works if the paired particles remain isolated. Introduce enough random interference, and the connection breaks. But, with something this integrated into your nervous system, the shock could kill me, yes. But, death is preferable to serving as a beacon for the fleet. * Maggie looked up from her screens to meet those ancient, star-bright eyes. There's another option. What if instead of destroying the nanomachines, we reprogram them? The concept took hours to explain, but Valthor's vast intelligence grasped the implications quickly. Rather than trying to remove or destroy the poison, they would corrupt its programming, turning the nanomachines into something beneficial. The key was understanding that the Devourer's greatest strength, their absolute reliance on technological perfection, was also their greatest vulnerability. They've never encountered a species that embraces chaos the way humans do, Maggie explained as she calibrated her makeshift quantum interference generator. Every other civilization they've conquered probably tried to fight technology with better technology. But, we've always been a species of jury-riggers and creative problem-solvers. We make things work that shouldn't work, using whatever materials we can find. Your duct tape and determination approach, as your mind translates it, * exactly. These nanomachines expect to interface with a perfectly ordered biological system, like your people's. But, human physiology is chaotic, full of redundancies and evolutionary quirks. If I can introduce a sample of my own neural patterns into their programming. The procedure required a direct connection between Maggie's nervous system and the alien nanomachines, using equipment she'd built from spare parts and 3 decades of accumulated electronic components. It was dangerous, potentially lethal for both of them, but, as Valthor pointed out, they were already racing against time. The Devourer fleet moves between dimensions, the dragon explained as Maggie prepared the neural interface. They can traverse vast distances quickly, but they must emerge into normal space to feed. My poison will guide them to your solar system within days, unless we can break its signal. The neural connection felt like touching a live wire. Maggie's consciousness suddenly expanded, touching not just Valther's mind but the vast network of nanomachines that had infected the dragon's body. She could feel their relentless purpose, their single-minded drive to broadcast location data to their creators. But she could also feel their confusion as her chaotic human thought patterns began interfering with their programming. Now, Valther urged, and Maggie triggered the quantum interference pulse. Pain exploded through both their minds as the nanomachines fought to maintain their programming. But human stubbornness was a force the Devourers had never encountered. Where their previous victims had tried to resist through strength or superior technology, Maggie simply refused to let the machines work properly. She introduced random errors, contradictory commands, and impossibly inefficient solutions that somehow achieved the desired results. The crystalline growths began to change, their harsh light softening into something warmer. Instead of broadcasting Valther's location, the nanomachines began strengthening the dragon's damaged neural pathways, healing wounds that had been thought permanent. The poison became medicine through sheer bloody-minded human ingenuity. When the transformation was complete, both woman and dragon lay exhausted but victorious. The workshop was silent except for the steady hum of equipment and Valther's much improved breathing. Did it work? Maggie asked weakly. In response, Valther moved for the first time since she'd found him, raising his great head with fluid grace. The crystalline growths still covered parts of his body, but they now pulsed with warm, golden light that seemed to strengthen his movements rather than hinder them. It worked beyond my wildest hopes. The nanomachines are not only severed from the Devourer network, they are actively strengthening my body and mind. I feel renewed but their celebration was short-lived. Valther's enhanced senses detected something approaching long before Maggie's equipment registered any anomaly. They are coming. The fleet received my last signal before the connection was severed. They will arrive in your solar system within hours, how many ships? Maggie was already moving, gathering the data from their successful procedure. A harvest fleet, 7 vessels, each capable of sterilizing a continent. They will expect minimal resistance from a primitive species like yours, Maggie paused in her preparations. Then, they're in for a surprise, aren't they? She spent the next hour making encrypted phone calls to contacts she hadn't spoken to in years. Retired colleagues from NASA, old friends from various military research projects, former students who had gone on to work in cutting-edge technology firms. To each, she delivered the same message: humanity was about to face its first test as a spacefaring species, and they needed every advantage they could get. You understand, she told Valther as she uploaded their research data to a secure government server, that I'm essentially ending my peaceful retirement to become a war consultant for the human race? I understand that your species is remarkable. In 3 days, you have accomplished what my people's greatest minds could not achieve in centuries of research. The Devourers have never faced a species that could turn their own weapons against them. Oh, honey, Maggie said with a grim smile, you haven't seen anything yet. The response to her calls exceeded her wildest expectations. Within 6 hours, her quiet Montana clearing was buzzing with activity as military transports landed in the snow. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel arrived from around the globe, all united by the magnitude of what they were facing. General Patricia Reeves, Maggie's former colleague from the Strategic Defense Initiative, took charge of coordinating the response. Give me the situation, Maggie. How long do we have, and what are we dealing with? Valther, now strong enough to move around the workshop, provided detailed intelligence about Devourer technology and tactics. The alien fleet was powerful, but it had one crucial weakness: they had never faced a species that fought with such creative unpredictability. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming technological superiority, the dragon explained through the translation system Maggie had rigged up. They expect their enemies to fight conventionally, using the most advanced weapons available. They have never encountered a species that might choose to fight with primitive but effective solutions. Dr. Sarah Kim, a former student of Maggie's who now headed DARPA's nanotechnology division, studied the data from their successful nanomachine reprogramming. This is incredible. We can actually use their own technology against them, but we need a delivery system. I have an idea about that, Maggie said. But you're not going to like it. Her plan was typically audacious. Instead of trying to match the Devourer's advanced technology, they would exploit humanity's greatest strength, its ability to innovate under pressure using whatever resources were available. The key was understanding that the aliens expected a conventional space battle, with ships and weapons firing at each other across vast distances. What if we don't give them a battle at all? Maggie proposed. What if we give them exactly what they came here for, a harvest? The plan required precise timing and absolute trust in human ingenuity. Using modified versions of the nanomachine reprogramming technique, they would create a false harvest, making Earth appear to surrender while actually preparing a trap that would turn the Devourer's own technology against their entire fleet. As the alien ships entered the outer solar system, humanity prepared for its most unconventional defense. In a converted barn in Montana, a 93-year-old woman and a wounded dragon had started something that would change the course of galactic history. The Devourers were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that refuses to fight fair. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's chief xenobiologist, arrived just as the first Devourer scout ships were detected passing Jupiter. Maggie, the readings we're getting from this dragon, the nanomachine integration isn't just healing him. It's enhancing him beyond his species' normal capabilities. Valther demonstrated by lifting a piece of equipment that should have required mechanical assistance, his scales now glowing with integrated energy. The human approach to problem solving has created something unprecedented. The nanomachines are evolving, learning to work with biological systems rather than controlling them, which means, Maggie said slowly, that we've accidentally created something the Devourers will desperately want to study. They've spent millennia perfecting their control technology, but we've shown them a form of true symbiosis. The implications were staggering. Not only had they created a potential defense against the invasion, they had developed something that could revolutionize the relationship between technology and biology throughout the galaxy. The question is, General Reeves said grimly, do we use it to save ourselves, or do we use ourselves as bait to save everyone else? Maggie looked around at the assembled scientists and military personnel, then at Valther, whose ancient eyes held new hope for the first time in centuries. Outside, the winter wind howled through the Montana pines, but spring was coming. And, with it, the greatest test humanity had ever faced. Why not both, she said finally. After all, we're pretty good at doing impossible things. The Devourer fleet emerged from dimensional space like a plague of metal locusts, their 7 massive ships casting shadows across Earth's moon. Each vessel stretched for miles, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with the absorbed life force of 100 dead worlds. To their sensors, Earth appeared exactly as expected, a primitive planet ripe for harvest, its inhabitants already broadcasting surrender signals. They had no idea they were flying into the most elaborate trap in human history. Contact in 18 minutes, reported Colonel Martinez from the hastily established command center in Maggie's barn. The space had been transformed into a high-tech nerve center, filled with quantum computers, communication arrays, and monitoring equipment that tracked every aspect of their unprecedented battle plan. Maggie stood beside Valther, her hand resting on the dragon's flank. The nanomachines in his system had continued to evolve, creating new neural pathways that allowed him to interface directly with human technology. Through him, she could feel the alien fleet's approach like a cold weight pressing against her consciousness. They're scanning the planet now, Valther reported, his mental voice carrying across the communication network they'd established. 7 Harvest commanders, each expecting to claim a section of your world. They see the surrender broadcasts and believe your species has given up without a fight. Perfect, said Dr. Sarah Kim, monitoring the nanomachine deployment systems they'd spent the past week constructing. All transmission stations are ready. The modified nanomachines are loaded and waiting for the signal. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of fighting the Devourers directly, they would offer them exactly what they came for, but with a twist the aliens would never see coming. When the harvest beams began draining Earth's biosphere, they would instead absorb billions of modified nanomachines programmed with the same chaotic human logic that had cured Valther. The entire Devourer fleet would become infected with humanity's greatest strength, the ability to find creative solutions in impossible situations. Remember, General Reeves addressed the global network of coordinators, this only works if we sell the deception completely. The moment they suspect we're fighting back conventionally, they'll withdraw and blast the planet from a safe distance. President Chen, who had arrived from Washington an hour earlier, watched the tactical displays with grim determination.
The world is watching, Maggie. If this doesn't work,
then we'll figure out something else, Maggie replied firmly.
That's what humans do.
The first harvest beam struck the Pacific Ocean with devastating effect. To the devourers, it appeared that Earth's primitive defenses had crumbled instantly, just as they had on countless other worlds. Water began to rise in massive columns toward the alien ships, carrying with it the processed life energy they craved. But, hidden within the water were trillions of nanomachines, each one programmed with human neural patterns and, carrying a simple but revolutionary message: cooperation was more effective than control.
Harvest Beam 2, hitting Europe, Martinez reported. Beam 3, targeting Africa. All nanomachine payloads are deploying successfully.
Through Valther's enhanced senses, Maggie felt the moment when the modified nanomachines reached the devourer ships. There was a pause, a moment of confusion as the alien technology encountered something it had never experienced before. Then, chaos erupted across the fleet.
They're trying to purge the infection, Dr. Kim reported, watching streams of data from their monitoring systems.
But, the nanomachines are adapting faster than their countermeasures can respond.
What followed was a transformation unlike anything in galactic history.
The devourer ships, built from the absorbed technology of conquered civilizations, began to change. Instead of simply processing and consuming everything they touched, they started to create. The biomechanical hulls sprouted new structures, gardens, habitation pods, communication arrays designed for cooperation rather than domination. "It's working," Valther said, wonder filling his mental voice. "The nanomachines are teaching them what your species understands instinctively, that diversity and chaos can be sources of strength rather than weakness." But, the transformation wasn't without resistance.
3 of the 7 ships managed to partially purge the infection, their commanders recognizing the threat and attempting to retreat to dimensional space.
This was the moment Maggie had prepared for. "Valther, are you ready?" she asked. The dragon moved to the center of the barn, where they had constructed a massive amplification array. The nanomachines in his system had been gradually building toward this moment, creating a biological quantum transmitter that could reach across space instantly.
"I am ready.
But, understand, once I do this, there will be no hiding what your species has accomplished. Every civilization in the galaxy will know that humanity has found a way to transform devourer technology, *good, Maggie said firmly.
It's time the galaxy knew we're here."
Valther spread his wings and began to sing. The sound was indescribable, part music, part mathematical equation, part plea for understanding. But, carried within it were the nanomachine patterns that had saved his life, broadcast on quantum frequencies that could reach every corner of the galaxy instantly. To any civilization listening, the message was clear: the devourers could be saved, not destroyed, and Earth had found the key. The effect on the fleeing ships was immediate. Their partial immunity collapsed as the enhanced nanomachines found new pathways into their systems. But, more importantly, the song reached something else: other devourer fleets scattered across the galaxy, all of them receiving the same message of transformation. "We're getting responses," Dr. Elena Rodriguez reported from Xenobiology Station.
"Quantum transmissions from everywhere.
Dozens of civilizations that have been hiding from the devourers are coming out of concealment." The tactical displays began showing new contacts throughout the solar system as ships emerged from hiding.
The Draknath, Valther's people, arrived first, 3 magnificent vessels crewed by dragons who had thought their comrade was lost forever.
Behind them came representatives of species humanity had only dreamed of, crystalline beings who communicated through light, gaseous entities that existed in the vacuum of space, artificial intelligences that had transcended their creators centuries ago.
"My God," President Chen whispered. "How many civilizations have been waiting for something like this?"
"Hundreds," Valther replied.
"The devourers have controlled this galaxy for millennia.
But, they could never eliminate all resistance, only force it into hiding. Your species has given everyone hope for the first time in generations." The 7 devourer ships, now fully transformed, began broadcasting their own messages. Their crews, freed from the compulsive need to consume and destroy, were experiencing emotions they had forgotten: curiosity, compassion, wonder at the diversity of life they had spent so long trying to eliminate.
The fleet commanders want to meet, General Reeves reported. They're requesting permission to land and apologize?
Maggie laughed, the sound carrying clearly across the communication network.
Well, that's a first. Vaelther, what do you think? Should we invite genocidal aliens over for dinner? I think, my friend, that your species has just done something unprecedented in galactic history.
You have turned an invasion fleet into an embassy. The landing site they chose was a field near Maggie's cabin, now expanded to accommodate vessels the size of small cities.
As the first Devourer ship settled onto Earth's surface with surprising gentleness, its hull continued to transform.
What had been a weapon of destruction became something resembling a massive garden, with transparent sections showing the crew working frantically to understand their new condition. The being that emerged from the ship barely resembled the terrifying devourers of galactic legend. The nanomachine transformation had restored features that had been suppressed for millennia. Instead of a purely mechanical horror, they saw something almost human in its basic structure, though clearly adapted for a different environment.
Was
Harvest Commander Zethka, it said through a translation device that had adapted itself to human languages. I have consumed the life of 17 worlds. I remember every scream, every plea for mercy.
The nanomachines you have created, they have given me back my conscience. How do I live with what I have done?
Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, her xenobiology training overridden by simple human compassion.
The same way anyone lives with terrible mistakes.
You acknowledge them, learn from them, and spend the rest of your life trying to make amends.
Your species offers forgiveness so easily?
Our species offers second chances, Maggie corrected.
What you do with yours is up to you.
Over the following days, as more ships arrived and first contact protocols were hastily established, the full scope of what they had accomplished became clear. The nanomachine transformation wasn't just spreading among devourer fleets, it was propagating throughout their entire civilization, undoing millennia of technological and psychological conditioning. We've essentially triggered a galactic renaissance, Dr. Kim observed as she studied reports from across known space. Every devourer outpost, every conquered world where their technology was present, it's all being transformed. But, perhaps the most remarkable change was happening right in Maggie's backyard. The barn that had started as a simple workshop had become the de facto center of galactic diplomacy, with representatives from dozens of species gathering to witness humanity's first formal introduction to the broader cosmic community. The Galactic Council wants to offer Earth full membership, reported Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation to the President, who had been designated as humanity's first interstellar diplomat. Along with protectorate status for our solar system and full access to their technology archives.
What's the catch? Maggie asked, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of tea.
At 93, she found that even saving the galaxy was less tiring than dealing with bureaucracy.
No catch.
Apparently, what we've accomplished here is so unprecedented that they're willing to break a dozen regulations just to maintain diplomatic relations. The ability to reverse devourer conditioning is being called the greatest technological breakthrough in galactic history. Vaelther, who had grown stronger and more radiant with each passing day, settled beside her with a sound that might have been draconic laughter. They are also terrified of your species.
The same creativity that saved the galaxy could reshape it in ways they cannot predict. Are they right to be worried? President Chen asked. Maggie considered the question carefully.
Around them, the barn buzzed with activity as human and alien scientists worked together on projects that would have been pure science fiction a week ago. Through the windows, she could see devourer ships being transformed into research vessels, their crews working alongside the very species they had once hunted to extinction.
Probably, she admitted. Humans have never been good at leaving well enough alone.
Give us access to galactic technology, and we'll probably have it improved and modified beyond recognition within a generation.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Maggie smiled, watching a young human engineer explain something to a crystalline being that existed partly in another dimension.
I guess we'll find out together.
The former Harvest Commander Zethka approached, still struggling with movements that were no longer purely mechanical.
Elder Chen, my people have voted.
The former Devourer fleets wish to dedicate themselves to restoration, rebuilding the worlds we destroyed, helping the species we displaced. But we need guidance.
How do we learn to create instead of consume? Same way anyone learns anything, Maggie replied.
You start with small projects and work your way up.
Valther, didn't you mention that your people lost some colonies in the early wars? Maybe that's a good place to start.
As the sun set over the Montana mountains, casting long shadows across a field full of impossible ships, Maggie reflected on the strange turns life could take. A week ago, she had been a retired engineer looking forward to a quiet evening with her books. Now she was apparently the unofficial grandmother of galactic civilization.
No regrets?
General Reeves asked, settling beside her on the porch.
Are you kidding? Maggie laughed.
I just helped save the galaxy using duct tape and stubbornness.
This is the best retirement project ever.
Inside the barn-turned-embassy, humans and aliens continued working together on plans for a future that none of them could have imagined. The Devourers were learning to heal instead of harm. The hidden civilizations were emerging from their refuges. And, at the center of it all, a wounded dragon and a stubborn old woman had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe was the willingness to help a stranger in need.
The galaxy would never be the same.
And, for the first time in millennia, that was a good thing. Outside, snow began to fall again on the Montana wilderness, just as it had the morning Maggie found Valther. But, now the crystals that caught the light weren't alien poison, they were just snowflakes, beautiful and unique, each one different from all the others. It seemed like a fitting metaphor for the new age of diversity and cooperation that humanity had helped to birth among the stars. The universe had just discovered that chaos, creativity, and compassion could be more powerful than any weapon ever devised. And it all started with a grandmother who refused to let anyone die alone in the snow.